are back at the G Arena live from London for the Hearthstone Spring Masters. We just saw Firebat win his first match 3-0 over Drakes with some impressive mage play. A lot of foresight going into that. But in this match, we have Tice versus Anaro. And Monkey, you were actually able to sit down with Anaro and get a little background from him on the player. He's one of the players who came from the open bracket.
Yeah, he was a player that came from the open bracket. He's actually 16 years old, and this will actually be his first tournament, his first big Hearthstone tournament, his big first Hearthstone LAN. He qualified for this event, and immediately after, he was actually picked up by a UK team, Team Eclipse, I believe. So we don't know too much about him. I talked to him. He's very quiet, very unassuming, and he's very excited to be here, meeting all the players that he's seen, that he's watched, and it might just be the beginning of his Hearthstone career.
Yeah, it definitely could be. Always nerves can get the better at you those first events. I remember even back in the fight night, I was used to card games at that point, but very first event there, I could feel the nerves getting to me a little bit when I finally sat down and put the headphones on, and I was on the stage there. And Tice, though, this guy needs no introduction to competitive Hearthstone. If you guys have been following it at all, this guy has put up so many strong finishes, a lot of top fours. He's a DreamHack in Bucharest under his belt. He got second at DreamHack Winter, and he was a 9-time King of the Hill winner in that series when it was running on iHearthU. So no shortage of talent again in this tournament. And what a opponent you have to go against first round, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's exactly like the last match actually, where there's one big Titan in Firebat, one big Titan in Tice versus a lesser-known player who's trying to make a name for himself. Hopefully, this player will do a little better than the last player from the last newer player. The last player got 3-0'd by Firebat's incredible lineup, but fortunately, Tice. He actually has Life Coach here with him right now. Life Coach, he's not playing at this event, but he just came here to support his teammate.
Yeah, he definitely did, and we're going to get right to the game. Sorry about this, we were just having some little technical issues with this, but now we're right into the gameplay, so we're going to get at both sides of this match and see what's going on. So it's going to be Druid, Rogue, Mage for Tice. That's what he's bringing to his lineup, and Anaro's actually got Paladin, Warlock, and Mage coming into his. So Mech Mage, really no surprise to see on both sides of these boards. Just such a strong, aggressive deck with really efficient drops at pretty much every step of the curve.
Mm-hmm. Tice is actually one of the players that first brought Mech Mage to tournaments. He actually 4-0'd his opponent in the recent Deck Wars tournament, and it's one of the big tournaments that actually propelled Mech Mage to one of the best decks in the format. After Hunter was nerfed, Mech Mage sort of became the big deck, the big aggro deck in competitive play, so it's definitely seeing a lot of play recently.
Pretty solid starts from both these guys too. Mech Yeti and Goblin Blast Mage maybe a little bit slow. Mm-hmm. I definitely tend to say that Anaro's getting the better side of things here. Probably going to be Mirror Entity that's fetched out of this. We've seen a couple secrets from time to time. Lothar, he played a copy of Counterspell in Mech Mage when he made the finals of that Kingwood tournament versus his teammate, Life Coach.
Yeah, in Mech Mage Mirror, you have one player who draws Mech Warper. The other player doesn't draw Mech Warper, and it's kind of like in the Druid Mirror where one player draws Innervate and Wild Growth, and it might just snowball from here.
Yeah, going to be certainly a tough time. And looks like there's a little bit of a tech issue maybe for this game. We're probably going to have to reconnect to this one in a moment. And Tice's looked like his might have bugged out on the spectator side of things, so we're going to try to get this fixed as quickly as we can and go forward from here.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty straightforward play from Anaro, though. He has two Mad Scientists. He has the Tinker Tactic Edition, so he's going to curve out pretty well. Meanwhile, for Tice, he does have the Goblin Blast Mage, which is one of the best cards in on the 4-drop slot, but he probably won't get to use it because his board will probably be cleared in the next turn.
Yeah, so much power to the board. Like you said, Mech Warper really making such a difference here. It really is just like it's like a 2/3 Wild Growth.
It's like a Wild Growth that keeps on giving, right? Yeah. Yeah, so what are your thoughts about Mad Scientist having both of them in your hand? A lot of players have been saying, like, for example, Strifecrow, he's down on his stream, you actually don't want both Mad Scientists in your hand, but you want... But, for example, when Lothar played a Counterspell in his deck, he had multiple secrets, so that actually made Mad Scientist a bit better to have two of in your hand, in your opening hand.
Yeah, I think Mad Scientist is one of those cards you're just really not disappointed to see at pretty much any step of the way. That's sort of my opinion on it.
Yeah, judging by the fact that Tice is actually making some moves right now, it might be Anaro that has disconnected.
Yeah, definitely could have. Fireball's got in his hand, and you can tell by the rope being happened so far here. It does look like this is a DC, so gonna wait for word on the admin to see exactly what the policy is here. But for now, it's gonna be Fireball. Yeah, so his entire last turn was skipped on a disconnect side. It looks like that's really unfortunate.
Yeah, and you can see how much one turn just affects these matchups,
Yeah.
especially tempo matchups like Mech Mage versus Mech Mage. It seemed like Anaro had a pretty solid lead, but right now Tice has all the initiative, not only with the board advantage, but also a mirror entity in play.
Yeah, definitely some some rough stuff here. One turn makes just a world of difference, especially early on.
Like, even if you play a mad scientist on the field, which is your weakest minion in your hand, you're just going to give your opponent another mirror entity, right?
Yeah. Like, no, don't get a mad scientist. I don't want you to have your other mirror entity out of your deck and in play.
Mm-hmm. You know, one interesting thing about Tice's deck is actually there's 2 mechanical Yetis in the deck. We don't see that very often, if at all, in modern mech mages. People have been playing either one mechanical Yeti, or they've cut it all together in favor of higher drops like Lotheb and piloted Sky Golem. The 4-drop slot is usually contested by things like piloted Shredder and the Goblin Blast Mage. So Tice definitely running a lot of 4-drops in his deck right now.
Yeah, I'm curious if that's a nod just to the importance of the 4-drop slot. It's just so powerful right now. Like, every 4-drop seems like it's so strong. I mean, can you imagine, like, a mech deck? Like, it's cutting mechanical Yetis, like you said, in some of the more modern builds. That's just, like, how strong that slot is. Is he just playing more mechanical Yetis just because he wants to have more stuff going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just getting word from the admins that because the game has bugged, we're actually going to replay this game right now.
Yeah, so obviously, not like a big deal from that. Still really early in the game was really kind of up in the air. I definitely would have tended to say that Anaro had a slight advantage, but as a wise man once told me, the technology is the vehicle of esports, and sometimes that vehicle stalls a little bit. So going to be a remake here. No, not a big one, and I'm going to guess that both these players are going to be playing Mage again, given what's happened here. So how does this change the dynamic of the matchup where both of the players know now that the mage that they're going to be playing with is a mech mage?
I think the biggest thing about the matchup right now is that Anaro, he's kind of a newer player, and just to have his first live Hearthstone game and his first live Hearthstone event be interrupted by something like his game bugging out, it might just tilt him too much. Whereas Tice, if it happened to Tice, he's a very experienced player. These things have definitely happened to him before, so I think he'll be able to take the whole situation more in stride.
Definitely could be, but on the other side of the coin, he may be happy to get a little bit of a breather.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you'd be upset to have lost what looked like a pretty distinct advantage, but you're like just kind of like, okay, we can relax, take a moment, breathe, everything, stay cool, stay calm.
Yeah, definitely giving him some time to just think everything over, think the Mech Mage versus Mech Mage matchup, and maybe hopefully he'll draw a Mech Warper again just to repay for his good luck the last game.
Yeah, so we're going to be going right back into game 1. So again, Mage versus Mage is what it's going to be, and we're going to be getting Tice's side up for this as soon as we can.
Yeah, this time Tice does have the coin, which I would say is probably an advantage in aggro mirrors right now. Oh, well, actually, it's Anaro. We're because Tice's vision kind of bugged last time, we're watching Anaro.
Yeah, so we're going to be on the narrow side of this right now, waiting on potential for the invite here. So I'm going to go ahead and pitch back. It actually keeps on the Frostball here. What do you think of that? That's something that we haven't seen like too much.
Yeah, there's, I guess, 2 distinctive schools of thoughts. One is that you always want to have the early minions on board.
Yeah.
But with this line of play, keeping the Frostbolt, he's saying that even if I fall behind, I can come back into this game. So he's going to have a less snowbally hand, but if he ever falls behind, he'll actually have some chance to deal with like Mech Warpers, for example.
Yeah, so Cogmaster versus Cogmaster, usually the first one has a pretty big advantage there.
Yeah, Tice, he could play. There's a lot of 2-drops in his hand that he could play, but wow there's nothing in his hand right now.
I mean, that has to be that there's no 2-drop there. There's no reason to not play a 2-drop that is a mech anyway. Maybe Mad Scientist is the only other 2-drop he's got. Or maybe he just mulliganed and found all of his high curve cards. He said, like you mentioned, he does have 2 copies of Mechanical Yeti in here. There's a potential that he's just drawn a higher portion of his curve.
Yeah, it's entirely likely that cards like Clockwork Gnome have been cut in his deck to make way for those kind of cards, or maybe even Annoytron, perhaps. Annoytron isn't a very aggressive card, so I guess it might make sense for him to cut it. You know, he was the first player who actually cut mirror entities in his mech mage decks.
Yeah.
He played one mirror entity because he was like, oh, I just don't want to draw mirror entities ever. So why would I play two of them in my deck, right?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's one of those cards where it's in there strictly for the death rattle on Mad Scientist. Definitely a lot of sense to be made there. I imagine this 3 damage is going to go for face so he can keep trying to buy tempo. Every time he gets to occupy some of his opponent's mana, it actually really helps in this matchup. Early on, it's just, we saw it last game. Every turn is so important. So this Mad Scientist is almost certainly going to be running into either the Spider Tank or the Cogmaster here. I imagine the Cogmaster, because the Spider Tank's going to be frozen this turn. But just every single step of the way, it's so important. And I wonder if this is exactly the kind of scenario he was thinking about when he kept that Frostbolt, was how important it is to follow up the Mad Scientist Death Rattle in a spot like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you play this in this style, you basically you can get the secret on board, and you can deal with your opponent's board in a single turn, and it's just such a huge tempo swing. We saw Tice; he didn't have a 2-drop in his hand previously, and if he didn't draw something like a 1 or 2-drop in these few turns, it could possibly be game over right now if he can't counter the mirror entity.
Yeah, giving your opponent something like a Piloted Shredder or a Mechanical Yeti is just not a fantastic spot to be in right now. And Goblin Blast Mage, even if that's a hit to the board, it has such a low chance of killing a 3-health minion.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's something like a 30%, around 30% chance to kill a 3-health minion. Something like a 60 or 70% chance to kill a 2-health minion. So very useful against shades, of course.
Yep. So Noyatron's gonna back up this mirror entity. So he definitely didn't cut a Noyatron. And Mad Science is gonna follow this up. So again, trying to buy tempo, but now this Goblin Blast Mage, really a big chance to kind of rain some terror down.
Yeah, hitting anything is good at this point.
This could just be a total disaster for Tice. And not one of his worst results, I would think. Wait, hang on. Did you just see what happened?
Yeah, he got the Goblin Blast Mage from the
Death Rattle off the Mad Scientist.
Exactly. Did they change that recently, actually? I remember there being some patch notes that saying that these kind of Mad Scientist secrets resolve a little differently.
I mean, I don't really know. It feels to me like that should not have been the case. I think it feels like to me is like a battle cry is you get the effect when the minion comes into play if you played it from your hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now it's kind of like the best case scenario actually for Tice.
Wow.
But unfortunately, the second Goblin Blast Mage is drawn, and I think that's probably one of the most impactful cards in this matchup. Like it's the only card in either deck that does some kind of AoE damage, quote unquote AoE damage.
Yeah, I think that this trade makes all the sense in the world for that one. But there's 2 different lines of play here, and this is definitely one of them. But when he actually picks off a 3-health Blast Mage too. His other line was Cogmaster or Noyatron attack and ping, but I don't think he wants to sacrifice his Snow Chugger here. I think he's just content with taking the gamble.
Yeah.
Even if he misses, then he sacrifices the Snow Chugger, ends up with a 5/4 on board.
Mm-hmm. And with this play, he also ends up with more power on board, so it's just overall, I think, a stronger play. And what's really interesting is that on turn 6, both players are such high life totals because they've been just trying to control the board so often. Yeah, this matchup, even though they're both typically aggro decks, board control is just paramount, just like in the old Zoo versus Zoo mirrors.
Yeah. Everything going into board control in these first stages. I'm curious if he's going to trade with this Mechanical Yeti or let the Noyatron do work. I'm going to trade that up. And Finicky Cloakfield.
Yeah, probably not a too useful one. You probably want to save that for Antonidas, right? Antonidas plus Finicky Cloakfield is usually just a game over.
That's probably one of the biggest swings that the deck can actually even have is something like Archmage and Finicky Cloakfield. Great counter to Mirror Entity, of course, is Clockwork Gnome.
Yeah, Tice has been dealing pretty well with both mirror entities from Anaro. He was able to play a Clockwork Gnome this turn, and he was able to play a Neurotron for the previous mirror entity. We noticed with relation to deck building choices, we see Anaro's playing an Azure Drake, whereas Tice is playing the Lotheb. And usually, when you're deck building the Mech Mage, you only pick one of the two. And I think probably it's hard to say which is better in this matchup, but I would tend to say Lotheb because it's just overall a stronger minion.
Yeah, Azure Drake for sure going to come down. Wow, Tice floats 4 mana. What kind of hand do you have when you float 4 mana?
He definitely has one spare part from the mechanical Yeti.
Yeah.
That's correct. And I think he probably does have a he might have a Doctor Boom in his hand because he's on 7 mana. But if you don't really want to play a Doctor Boom into a mirror entity at 7 mana, right?
Not unless you want to give your opponent a 7/7. If you want to give him a 7/7, that's the best way to do it.
Not unless you have like an unstable portal BGH, right?
That's always a good feeling. You know, that happened to me the other day, actually. Someone unstable portal BGH'd.
Of course.
And innervated Dr. Boom, and I was like, oh, okay. That's always
Whoa.
good stuff. So Fireball.
So that's your answer. That's the kind of hand he has.
Yeah,
just mass burn.
Just nothing but burn spells. That is not a timely mad scientist.
Yeah, so just keep loading up the board, more spare parts. Like if Anaro ever draws Archmage Antonius in this game, it's just almost game over.
Yeah.
And right now we can see he has like a pretty huge advantage just from the board states right now.
Yeah, ping on the Pilot Shredder, not a big surprise, and then damage being sent to face. And I imagine that with the way the board stays right now, it's going to be face for the rest of the game for Anaro, in a matter of whether or not he can close it out with his burn spells. And Thijs is just fighting from behind so much here.
Yeah, there's just very few options for Mech Mage to come back into the board in this situation.
Yep.
Typically, you need that Goblin Blast Mage, and I think that was really the difference in this game. Anaro drew both Goblin Blast Mages, while Thijs didn't draw any.
You know, there's two Dr. Boom. Or there's a Dr. Boom right off the top of those two Boom bots. Might have something to say about it, but again, just 14 points of damage. I think with the finicky cloak fields here, you just put everything to face. You hide your guys away. Whoa! This is... This turn needs to be a lot. He needed to take a lot more time on this turn because there's so many opportunities to really push for damage here. Like, say he'd put 8 damage into face, drop Piloted Shredder, and use Finicky Cloak Fields on his 2 4-power minions. Next turn, he goes into it with those 2 minions still on board. That's 8 more damage you get to face, and then Fireball in the face. So unless your opponent had a way to actually deal you 27 points of damage from that board position, you came out on top there. And with Dr. Boom, the 2 Boom bots, that's 9. He had 4 from Pilot Shredder. That's 13. So he would have needed 2 Fireballs and a Frostbolt to kill you, and he's already used a Fireball at this point.
Yeah, this might be just nerves getting to him. It is, after all, his first tournament, and he might not be considering everything. You know, back in the olden times when players had unlimited time to rope, basically, a lot of the more experienced tournament players took pretty much all the time they needed.
Oh, yeah.
While a lot of the newer players into the scene, they just, I'm just going to play like it's on ladder. I just want to play as fast as possible. And they just play to turn. It's like, 20 seconds, that's fine.
Yeah. You know a lot about taking maximum time.
I do.
Those unlimited turns.
Some people say I was the reason why they added the rope.
I would venture to say you're about 50% of it at minimum.
The other being Trump.
Those good old 7-minute fight night turns. Oh, the days.
So right now, I actually see Thijs possibly coming back from in this game. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a 7-drop. He had Archmage Antonius in his hand, and he had Dr. Boom. So, yeah, this might just be a comeback because Anaro, he used all his burn to clear minions, and now he's really top-decking every single turn now.
Here's the Clockwork Gnome, armor plating. Those are 2 Fireballs in Thijs' hand right now, by the way, and there is not 16 points. Well, I said there wasn't 16 points of damage, but we're getting awfully close now.
This is I guess he's with this play he's at least consistent. He's clearing the board all the time, but it's really hard to see Anaro winning from this position.
Yeah,
I guess Thijs has 2 Fireballs in his hand. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so if he has 2 Fireballs, then he's so close to winning right now. So that's 15 damage. So he needs, if he just Fireballs face.
Oh, wow. That is a big draw for Thijs right now. And I don't really care. I don't think he really cared at all where those missiles fell. This is going to be so much damage coming forward. Anaro's got to deal with not only the 5/4 Goblin Blast Mage, but he has to deal with the Clockwork Gnome. So he's got the Clockwork Gnome in check with the hero power. But this is such an important Piloted Shredder for him. You know, if he gets something like Millhouse Manastorm or Succubus or something like that, it could be okay. He gets Captain's Parrot instead. That has to be the worst one right now. It has to be the actual worst. And Thijs, he knows this, and just Fireball's going to be flung to face right now. Anaro needs a big draw to get back out of this one, and Mech Warper is not going to be enough. Wow, I cannot believe Thijs came back from that game. That board position, like, I would have I mean, we had basically almost called it at that point that he was so far behind, and when he floated 4 mana after that too.
I think it came down to the fact that, of course, he decided to trade instead of going for face. He basically turned it into a game of tempo where he drew 2 Goblin Blast Mages and his opponent didn't, into a game of who drew the bigger curve of their deck. And, of course, Tice drew the Archmage Antonitis. He drew the Dr. Boom, so he won in that respect. So
Yeah.
I do believe it was kind of a mistake for Anaro to go for the board clear to play into Tice's game.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I would like to see him be a lot more aggressive. The really key turn of that game was when he had the 2 Finicky Cloak Fields, and he had a potential to hide 2 4-power minions, and he chose not to do it. That was really the big difference there. Taking your time, still very crucial. You get 90 seconds a turn, and when you have a complicated turn, you should be taking it. Sure, when you have turn 1 Flame Imp, let's play turn 1 Flame Imp. Let's go ahead and pass the turn. But when you have that many different kinds of play with Finicky Cloak Fields, it's probably better to just take your time.
Yeah, I think spare parts were introduced into the game to just add a kind of dynamic where you don't know what spare part you're going to get, and you have to think a bit before you actually play out your hand. And in the case where Anaro, he had to fireball a Dr. Boom, that's what your opponent wants to do when he's down in tempo,
Yeah.
but he has this Dr. Boom, which is such huge value. You know, fireball, it does great damage for the value, for the mana, but Dr. Boom is just better overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those cards that gets so much value out of it. You know, if you think about the math of those, the Boombots deal on average 2.5 damage each. If they die in combat, they're dealing a point of damage to a minion that they're hitting, which means that if they die in combat, they deal on average 7 damage from a battle cry, and then you still have the 7/7 body afterwards from Dr. Boom. It's just so much pressure you get.
We're starting up the second game right now. It's actually going to be Warlock versus Rogue. We saw this matchup between Firebat and his opponent, and we're going to see it again now. Firebat's opponent played some kind of combo, some hybrid Demon Lock / Hand Lock.
Yeah, Drake's build was, you saw like sort of like a handlock build really early on, and then the Void Caller hit his hand. And then when the Void Caller hit his hand, he still had Ancient Watcher there. And then he drew a Mountain Giant at some point. And I'm like, I don't really know where all the cuts got made for this. But do you have Doomguard in here? Do you have something like Mal'Ganis? It was just so much different stuff was going on. I'm curious where the cuts were made to fit everything in.
Yeah, I think the rationale is basically people are saying, oh, Demon Lock is pretty good now, and Handlock is also a pretty good deck, so they both have really good cards. Let's see where I can mix and match these two decks and
kind of
come up
the
with a
same
better
vein as well. I mean, when you're just you're trying to find the right cards and come up with really powerful combos. That's basically the exact same thing a Handlock is trying to do. It's just trying to draw a lot of cards and then get a Mountain Giant on the board and push forward from there. And so far, the Zombie Child, 4 points of damage. So nothing big yet, but I think the 2/3 body might be able to throw a wrench in things. You know, when you're looking at a Zombie Child like this, say you have something like Earth and Ring Farseer in your hand, do you feel uncomfortable playing that into like, the potential to get Mortal Coiled or maybe a Defender of Argus coming out, or are you just happy to disrupt the curve?
I think it really depends on what turn you're facing against the Warlock. For example, on turn 4, Warlock, pretty much he wants to either Twilight Drake, Mountain Giant, or Void Caller. So if you play something like a Farseer right now, or even better, like I'm thinking maybe a Van Cleef this turn. If you play something like that, Sprint is even better. Yeah, if he plays like a 3/3 now, you don't really mind getting Mortal Coiled because it means your opponent won't be able to put down his big threats of the Twilight Drake, Mountain Giant, or Void Caller.
Sequencing really important there, by the way.
Yeah.
Coin and then preparation and sprint. I have done the prep coin sprint before.
I think everyone has at one point or another.
It's so brutal.
And they've also done the prep sprint.
Oh, yeah.
Or prep into concede.
Yeah. It's usually what it is. When you sprint again and then you're trying to pull the SI7 agent in your hand, you're like, I know, I just double prepped. This sprint costs 1 mana. And you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done?
Yeah, prep is not as good as Innervate, perhaps.
4/8 Twilight Drake hitting the board here. And that's a lot of gas in that hand. And just unfortunately, due to some technical issues, we can't quite bring up Tice's hand. We're going to try to get that fixed as soon as we can. But for now, we're going to be playing it blind. And with 10 cards in his hand, I mean, a world of possibilities.
Now, Admiral, I want your opinion on this. Previously, Handlock was seen as kind of like a counter to Miracle Rogue, but now that Miracle Rogue doesn't have the Auctioneers and it runs kind of more board clearing options with Blade Flurry and Tinker, Sharpsword Oil, and somewhat more burst with Sharpsword Oil again, who do you think is favored in this matchup?
Well, I still thought when I was playing it again, because I was playing Purple Drank's Rogue deck on Ladder the other day, and he still has 2 copies of Auctioneer in his. But the gist of it's kind of the same. It's a lot of burn spells. Board consistency, 2 Blade Flurries, 2 Tinker Sharp Sword Oils, and really focusing on big turns and then just getting to the right cards the whole step of the way. So I initially thought that Handlock was going to be a really poor matchup, but the more I kind of played it, the more I realized that Sharp Sword Oil gives you so much leverage, and like how many cards you have to use to deal with threats, and at the same time builds up such a big dagger that they feel like their board is threatened from Blade Fury so often that it's changing the dynamic of how they're approaching the matchup. And when you have that changed, it gives the rogue more time. And when the rogue has more time, that's when it starts to win, is when it puts together those really brutal combinations towards the end of the game. Because the Warlock player has to be thinking the entire time, if I commit too much to the board, can I get punished for this? And the answer right now is yes. When you have Sharp Sword Oil, you can get in 8-point Blade Flurries. It definitely happens. So because of that, I would tend to say that it's starting to favor Rogue, but I don't think it's much more favored than like you typically would expect it to be. Like I think it's favored, but not. It's certainly not unwinnable from the Warlock side. Probably closer to like the 55-45% mark, I would say.
Yeah, we saw exactly what you're talking about in Firebat versus Drex, where Firebat he had an 8 mana or 8 damage Blade Flurry, and it just cleared the Handlock's entire board.
Yeah. If you see something like Preparation Sprint really early, I would say it's a gigantic advantage to the Rogue, but they don't always draw a hand like that.
Yeah, with this 9 or 10 card hand right now that Tice has, he most probably has that combination. So it's definitely something that Anaro has to be worried about.
Yeah, Sap can also buy a lot of tempo here. Something like Violet Teacher and Sap really would be a big hurt. We can't see Tice's list, unfortunately. There's a couple different rogues that I mentioned. Like Purple Trunk was running Gnomish Inventors in his build, and Gadgets and Auctioneers.
So essentially just the entirely old Miracle Rogue
There were
list.
no Violet Teachers, and there were no Pilot Shredders either. It was just very, very based on drawing cards, getting something to stick to the board, being able to use Tinker Sharp Sword Oil, and continuing to press your advantage here. So Lotheb Poison up, and I'd be pretty surprised if this attacked anything. And that's sort of the looming point right there, is when you see, oh, geez. That is a huge draw right now. When you see that poison be thrown on the dagger, you have to expect there's a potential for a Sharp Sword Oil with a Blade Flurry next turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and not only that, the poison is thrown on the dagger, and the rogue didn't attack into the Defender of Argus, which would have been an easy kill right there. I think Lotheb is probably one of the clear plays. His other plays include something like Sludge Belcher, but that just trades. The Lotheb trades so easily into that, right?
Yeah. The real question here, I think, is whether or not you trade off his Lotheb with your Mountain Giant, or if you just continue to push face damage. Because if he doesn't Blade Flurry next turn, when you play the Lotheb, that's 16 points of damage you'd get from a Mountain Giant. And I'm curious if that kind of pressure is exactly what he wants right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you do play the Lotheb, you kind of force your opponent. Oh, he goes for a slightly different play with the Farseer.
So I'm going to life tap first, get a little bit more info. 2 big Game Hunters being run in here also. So this list is really looking to line up versus control decks. Mm-hmm. So I think with a list like this one also, he's so unhappy to run into the Rogue build. Go from here. So a lot of potential board clear options from Tice, I imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, he had 10 cards in his hand a couple turns ago.
Yeah, I definitely see something like a board, definitely a Blade Flurry on this turn. He definitely telegraphed it, so I think Anaro might be somewhat playing around it, but I think it's still going to be an easy kill on this Mountain Giant that only has 6 HP.
Do you think there's any chance that Tice is ever bluffing a board clear with just the dagger up and pass?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Of course, we can't see the hand.
There's not like a ton of because I mean, honestly, if you really want to dig deep, there's not too much of a reason to have attacked the Defender of Argus last turn. It's only 2 points of damage, and if you anticipate being able to sweep it out with a Blade Flurry, it's not going to really be that big of a difference. So there's the Fan of Knives, and Blade Flurry is certainly coming after that. Yeah, there's the 3 to the face, and there's a 4-point Blade Flurry.
There we go. Yeah, admirable with the sound effects.
So Blood Mage easily dealt with at least. Nice little 1-mana answer there. Do you play Molten Giant this turn?
Oh, I think you play Mountain Giant
this turn instead. You're a master, Mug.
Of course. So Mountain Giant, I think you can even tap this turn.
I think I would tend to favor the big Game Hunters here. I just don't think they're going to be pulling very much weight in this matchup. I think I just want to get them out of my hand and hope that they deal 4 points of damage.
Yeah, it's essentially like if you play them, you'll be drawing out the SI agents, I guess. I do think you still want more cards, though. You can afford to be a bit more greedy. You can just tap, play the Mountain Giant, and still play the Ancient Watcher on the same turn. And it also sets up the Ancient Watcher for something like an Argus or an Owl that you could possibly draw.
Yeah.
I feel like big game hunters, you can kind of just pretend that they're not even there.
Well, if you're going to play the big game hunter, I think you should play the Mountain Giant first. So, yeah, I think the nerves are kind of actually playing a little bit of a factor in this game. I'm going to go with Ancient Watcher instead. Can't blame him for that. Again, setting up for a taunt, potentially for Ironbeak Owl. Ironbeak Owl is another card in this matchup that outside of Edwin Van Cleef, it just really doesn't do very much. So being able to have activated that as a draw.
Anaro also decided not to tap the last turn, and
Yeah.
he could have tapped and gotten the Giant out for 3 mana. He would have used all his mana, so essentially he would have paid 2 life for the card. But I think with this kind of play, he's saying that he's really afraid of a burst right now.
Yeah, I'm very mindful of his life total. I was just about to mention that. That's certainly what it is.
Thijs sees that it's not that much pressure, and he certainly has at least a sap right now.
Yeah,
but he's actually going to clear.
Yeah. Backstab Eviscerate. No, Spell Power with Backstab Eviscerate is such a good way to deal with a Giant.
Yeah, I actually really like the way Azure Drake works in Rogues these days. Before Naxxramas came out, Azure Drake was kind of used as the default 5-drop in pretty much every class.
Yeah.
But now it's not as good in every class, but it's so good in Rogue still. So Azure Drake, I just like the design right now of Rogue and of Azure Drake specifically in that class.
It fits right. Like before, Azure Drake it was just quite literally the best available option. It was just a 5-mana 4/4 that drew you a card, and there just wasn't a better option than that. So you just kind of had to use it. But now they're choosing to use it because it works so well with Phantomize and with Blade Flurry and with just all these damage-dealing spells that you have. With the other minions that people are playing, like Piloted Shredder is so very often played. And one of the worst feelings in the world is playing an Azure Drake into something like a Piloted Shredder. But if you can play Azure Drake and then backstab it for 3, it feels a lot better.
Yeah, just a lot of great dynamics. Also, like the decks that Azure Drake is played in, such as Shaman and Rogue, they are the decks that kind of need that card draw. Of course, you do have the Sprint in Rogue, and you do have Phantom Knives, but I feel like Rogue, it's just a class that just wants to use all its cards on within a few turns. So card draw very important.
Expend a lot and draw a lot. The name of the game. South Sea Deckhand.
Is it time?
Well, this could get interesting. Oh, geez. Well, if he had Blade Flurry this turn, it'd be really bad for Anaro, but he's kind of counting it up. And with the way that he's hesitating afterwards, I'd venture to say that Blade Flurry is not in his hand.
I think he just wanted to get this Tinker Sharpsword Oil and kind of figure out what to do right after he figures out what it lands on.
There's the 5 points of damage.
Oh, there is Blade Flurry.
He does have Blade Flurry. I'm actually really surprised he chose to not take the damage there.
Yeah, especially since he's seeing one Mortal Coil from Anaro, right?
He would have had Anaro down to 1 life right now with an Azure Drake, a 5/1 on board, and the potential hero power next turn at 12 life. It's not like Warlocks are playing with like Leroy Power Overwhelming anymore. Like,
exactly.
That's not found in the lineup. And then now look at he would have had to play Sludge Belcher and play Anti-Keelbot instead. So something like Sap would have been lethal. I mean, so much stuff would have happened if he would have decided to pay life there instead of using the 5/1 deckhand. I'm actually really surprised by that.
Yeah, but still, it might be an uphill battle for Anaro, just because the number of cards in his hand right now, and also the quality of the cards. Like, you have these 2 big game hunters, and you have the Ancient Watcher, and I don't see either of them being very good.
The Shadow Flame of the Ancient Watcher is really where that's going to be used, but he's at 6, and I don't really know if he has time to actually Shadow Flame one of those. Because certainly he's not going to feel comfortable not playing Anti-Keelbot next turn.
Yeah, the issue with playing both Ancient Watcher and Shadow Flame is that you use up 6 of your mana, and you might need to use it for other things, such as the heal bot.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
I would say that is a pretty huge draw.
That is definitely a huge draw right now. That's going to put an 8/8 on the board. 5 damage is going to swing across to the face. He's going to be able to Shadow Flame afterwards and drop Anti-Keelbot. This is, I think that was pretty much the, you say Miracle Rogue sometimes, but this looks like it's like Miracle Warlock right now. Like, oh, there's the other Molten Giant I needed. I blew up your board.
Yeah, it's just such a degenerate card, right? I'm playing an 8/8 for 0 mana.
Oh, jeez.
This is like this is something like 20 points of stuff that you put down in one turn.
And Thijs now, both of his Has both of his oils been used now, or was it just one of them?
Yeah, just one of them, I believe.
South Sea Deckhand has been used, though, so he doesn't have access to that anymore. He's used 2 Edger Drakes. He's used a Sprint. What does he have left to really push through here? He's got a copy of Eviscerate. He's got a Deadly Poison left. He doesn't have any Blade Flurries anymore. I mean, this is kind of like a really, really dire straits turn for Tice right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. I believe he only has cards that fight for board control, such as Violet Teacher, more Fan of Knives. So at this point, he really needs that board control.
Sapping is 0 mana, 8/8. That's always. Oh, it's actually 4 mana right now, so that's something at least. Well, this board may be scary enough. Honestly, I mean, I'd like to see him continue to attack with the dagger. I think every point of damage really matters right now. But he may not want to decrease the cost of Molten Giant.
That's a very good point. He has to think, at least right now, oh, wow. Just using a deadly...
Wow.
He really wants those 1/1 tokens, I guess.
He's protecting this board position very heavily right now. And, wow, Anaro still got some very powerful draws left in his deck. That's certainly one of them. I think this is just another Molten Giant and an anti-Galeebot.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you at this point.
You know, saying that, though, he is facing down 8 points of damage, or I'm sorry, 9 points of damage with the dagger. So if he feels comfortable enough, he can do something like Life Tap. Yeah.
I guess that's fine.
Just go up to 20. Here's my power. Do something.
I think at this point, it's actually kind of difficult to clear this board, but
Oh
Sprint
my
is a
gosh,
huge draw.
That was the last card. No, that was the last card in Tice's hand.
Oh, wow.
He's almost out of cards. He's got 1 card left in his deck right now.
So how many he's used 1 preparation, right?
Right.
So he does have at least 1 more prep left, and he might just have to use that for a sharp sword all this turn, and hope the oil doesn't land in one of his minions.
Oh my gosh, it'd be 66.66, repeating of course, percent chance of
there's
your sharp sword
the
success.
dagger.
Oh my, this is going for it.
Oh man, prep.
Oh, he's gonna have a 3rd token. I lied. Dang it, my math is wrong. The Lever Jenkins didn't work. It hit the right minion though.
So we have, how much damage do we have right now?
Wait, he's looking at 11 points of damage though. He's got to be concerned about how much counter damage there is.
Yeah, like things such as Argus even could just win the game right now.
Yeah, I think he's got to take out the anti-Galeebot.
Oh, he's actually taking out the
Yeah,
giant.
he can take out the giant too. This is fine as well.
You know, at this position, like Tice is actually not in a bad spot right now because Anaro's hand is just so bad. Like 2 big game hunters. Like, he decided to bring a deck with 2 game hunters in this tournament, and it might just be biting him in the ass.
Yeah, this is not good news for Anaro right now.
Ragnaros is...
That's going to need a pretty saucy hit if he wants that one to succeed. So, gonna have to really dig deep here. I'm trying to think about what cards he could potentially life tap for that make a big difference here.
Hellfire. Yeah, there we
well,
go.
There you You're just calling him today, man. You're really on point. So it's going to drop him down to 8, though. I mean, Eviscerate kills him at this point, right? And there's an Eviscerate left in Tice's deck, if I recall correctly.
The only thing is that, does he have something in a combo with it?
Does he have anything?
So I think he has Fan of Knives and Sap left. So
okay, so if Sprint was the only thing he had left to combo with it, he would take 1, 3, 6. He would take 10 damage from that.
Yeah,
So.
but fortunately he's used both sprints,
Yeah.
right? I think he just wins right now. Maybe he's deciding what to show.
Has he used the second Eviscerate this game and we just don't remember it? I mean, this has been a long game so far. We're 30 cards into the Rogue deck.
So I think there's definitely a fan. So if he's taking this long, he must not have an Eviscerate. I mean, there's no way Rogue is going to cut Eviscerate, right? Oh, man, Violet Teacher. And, yeah, there's the Sap.
I mean, he has to have used the other Eviscerate unless he's just really...
Really BM.
Yeah,
Right.
just really letting it linger. That's the 4 damage.
What else do we have? Oh, wow, just a dagger up.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess he has to have used 2 Eviscerates this game, and we just don't remember.
Goblin Auto Barber.
What the heck? We saw this, actually. This was to counter Mirror Entity.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he did such a great job, too.
It's been really popular lately among Rogue streams, such as Super JJ and such as, whoa.
Oh, my gosh, he doesn't have enough power to clear the Violet Teacher. He's 1 mana short because the Sylvanas cost 6.
No, wait, how can he clear this board right now?
He can't. He'd have to life tap if he wanted to do it, and that would put him in range. And Ragnaros can't be enough. It can't clear both the minions.
Yeah, and Rogue's at 9. Wait.
Oh my
Rogue hits face.
Oh my gosh, he's got a 33% chance to win this turn. This shot is so important for Anaro right now.
Senor Del Fuego is going to hit.
Oh, and he hits him in the Tice! I can't
Oh.
believe it! Tice is going to drop this game. Anaro's going to tie it up at 1 game apiece. I can't believe I wasn't even looking at YOLO Rag
Yeah, of
as
course.
the one way to win the game. The thing that Twitch chat spams more than anything else in the world with the YOLO Rag on that turn. And I can't believe that we were missing. I'm just like looking at his hand. I'm like, he can't clear it. What's he going to do? Well, he can clear his opponent sometimes.
Yeah,
So
just
that was a choice there.
why not rag face? That seems to be the best option each time, right?
Wow, what good stuff. What a crazy game that was. When did he use the first Eviscerate?
Yeah, we must have missed it
Was it
somehow.
like on a Sludge Belcher or something?
Possibly.
Yeah,
possibly,
I don't know.
yeah.
We totally missed it there. So, how did that game fall apart for Tice towards the end? It was, I mean, he got off an early prep sprint. He had a second sprint as a reload at some point. Was it just Molten Giant being able to like really swing that one turn? He needed something else to get on the board. He drew the Molten Giant, was able to play that and Antique Healbot, and then Shadow Flame off his slow tab.
Well, there are a few things you kind of want to do in Hearthstone generally. You want to heal sometimes to not die. You want to clear the board state in order to get board control. And you want to play minions on the board. And you know what? Anaro did all 3 of those things in one turn. He played a big minion, Molten Giant. He healed with the Antique Healbot, and he Shadow Flame to clear everything. So
It's like some of the biggest ones you'd be doing too, like kill your opponent's entire board, play an 8/8, and heal for 8.
yeah.
So just 2 big of swings there.
I also do feel like, as you mentioned, one of the big swing points is that Tice decided to not tank face damage with his dagger, and instead he decided to use his South Sea deckhand. And if that South Sea deckhand had lived, it represented 4 extra damage to Anaro's face and just a much bigger threat. So that could have closed the game even faster at
Yeah,
that
that
point.
was another big point too. I actually would have liked to see him. I mean, paying 8 life is tough to do, especially when you're at 20. But in that situation, being able to get that extra damage would have made so much of a difference in that game. And we could see in Naro's hand, he didn't have a Mortal Coil. He didn't have a way to deal with the South Sea deckhand that turn. It actually, I think that would have won Tice the game.
Another thing is that Anaro, his deck building was a bit questionable. He brought 2 BGHs to his deck, and in a matchup against Rogue, which I have to think he has to expect a lot of Rogue in this tournament. They're just kind of dead cards. They're kind of like Jungle Panthers that don't have abilities, right?
Yeah.
So those clogged up his hand so much, and that's one of the reasons the game was so close. If those cards had been something like big threats, such as maybe even a Mal'Ganis, the game would have been just over, and it wouldn't have come down to that rag shot.
Yeah, there's no question about that too. Wow, what? What a game.
Yeah.
33%. Yeah, sometimes 33% chance is just enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 33% chance is almost just like it's like 50-50. You hit or you don't hit, right?
Where's Amaz?
Amaz math.
He's somewhere here. Where's he at?
It's right there. Wave.
Hi, Amaz. Yeah, that's great math too. I mean, it kind of is true if you think about it. It either does hit it or it doesn't.
Yeah, of course. I trust him as
You
math.
just gotta believe.
I use it in my everyday life.
Believing is more important than actual potential outcomes.
Now, some people have told me that I am actually a Muzz, and I believe them.
Some people say you're Trump.
Well, that's true as well.
This is Monk. Don't worry about it.
All right.
Yeah, so we're waiting on for Tice. He's trying to get his mechanics worked out here, and we're gonna get everything done. And right as soon as we get players ready for this one, again we're having some technical issues with Tice's side of things. We wanted to make sure that we can get both hands available, so that's what the extra time is being taken to do. Seeing Anaro's side of it, it is really interesting too, like watching the games develop when you can't see the other side of the hand. It's like it puts you really in Anaro's seat at that point, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so scary. I don't want to overcommit to the board in fear of something like Blade Flurry. But I don't want to not put enough pressure on him and give him all the time he needs to draw the cards he wants.
It's kind of like in another very popular Blizzard game, StarCraft 2. When StarCraft 2 first came out, people saw that there's these really cool spectator features that allowed you to see production, what both players were making, the resources of both players, whereas in StarCraft Brood War, you didn't have those options. So when StarCraft 2 first came out, players or spectators were... At first, they were like, oh, we actually don't want to see all of this. We want everything to be hidden so there's more suspense. And there was certainly more suspense in that last game because we couldn't see either one of the hands.
Yeah, so we're going to be getting into this game now. It's going to be Mage for Anaro and Druid for Tice. Both these guys have one deck locked at this point. Warlock has been locked for Anaro. And again, because this is Conquest, they have to win a game with all 3 decks. And Tice had his Mage locked on the back of that big comeback. So with queuing up Druid here, which one of these, I mean, with Druid and Rogue being possible for Tice, do you think that this is going to be, that Mage is going to be his best choice instead of Paladin? Because I feel like Paladin isn't going to match up very well versus the Rogue deck.
I think Tice really wants to get a matchup of that Rogue versus a Paladin. Rogue is typically a very good counter against Paladin, and I think one of the reasons Rogue became so popular was because previously Paladin was so popular. So I think this is a pretty good matchup right now for Anaro, but still he kind of wants to save his Rogue for later on if he has the matchup against the Paladin.
Yeah, pretty good opening hand here, too, from Anaro.
Yeah, this is pretty much one of the dream opening hands, right?
I was like, what more can you ask for?
I can't complain here. Maybe a Mech Warper, right? But you know what? Mad Scientist is pretty much just as good.
Yeah. And picks up an Oratron too, so multiple ways to activate his Cogmaster, should he choose. And this is sort of a question here too. Do you like Mad Scientist here over the one-drops sometimes? Do you like playing a one-drop into Coin Spider Tank sometimes? Like, I mean, there's so many different lines of play here. Like, which one are you going to favor and why?
Yeah, there's a lot of schools of thought, and I think you might want to play the Cogmaster, but at the same time, the Mad Scientist is so good in this matchup because just Mirror Entity is so good in this matchup. The problem with the Mad Scientist, though, is that if your opponent sees that you coin out a Mad Scientist and eventually he draws like a Zombie Chow, as you often mention, that the Zombie Chow can just run into the Mirror Entity and it can just basically heal the Druid for 5.
Yeah, all good points. I mean, it's so tough to figure out a spot where Cogmaster isn't a turn one play.
Yeah.
It's really, I think.
I actually do like this line of play.
I think this is like part of the most difficult point of doing it is that just you're sacrificing a coin to deal less damage if you play the Mad Scientist first. And not only that, but the Mad Scientist isn't going to be able to run into a minion very often in this matchup. It's going to kind of sit there until your opponent plays something bigger.
With this line of play, with saving the coin, I feel like he has more options too.
Yeah.
So
this is also really smart too that he's choosing to coin out the Clockwork Gnome on this turn because it's putting a little bit more pressure on Tice to actually do something on turn 4. So if he wants to hero power here, he's not playing a 4-drop. And if he wants to play a 4-drop, he's leaving a 2-1 in place.
Yeah, there's just so many various threats on the board right now that Tice has to deal with, and they all have like kind of different responses. He can't really deal with the Mad Scientist, or he's going to face a Mirror Entity. He kind of has to deal with the Cogmaster because it's just so threatening right now. And he doesn't necessarily need to deal with the Clockwork Gnome, but it's just such a huge threat for such little mana.
Yeah.
And it seems easy to deal with, like, I mean, you just hero power it, right? But it's just so annoying at times.
Yeah, throwing off your curve. I mean, sort of like what we mentioned in the first game, we saw the Mage versus Mage. It was so much tempo dictating how the game is going to pan out. And so just every single point of damage in that situation matters, but more importantly is every single point of mana, too. So just big trade-offs that you have to make sometimes. If you had Keeper of the Grove here, would you... Yeah, I was going to say, is silencing this Mad Scientist going to be the best option?
Yeah, I think at this point, judging by that silence, like I think Tice definitely doesn't have something like a Zombie Chow or even any low drops, and I think he has to do that because he wants to set up his next few turns. He needs there to never be a Mirror Entity in the next few turns in order to stand a chance in this game.
Yeah, so your read is that you just got a heavy hand right now.
So at this point, Anaro has to be thinking, oh man, I have 4 minions on the board against the Druid. Mind control tech?
Yeah, it's definitely something he's going to consider. So this 3 damage is going to go to the face, and I imagine he's trading off these 2 little guys. Mostly to try to protect the Cogmaster. But the Cogmaster's going to go to 1 power. He's going to have to play another mech to follow it up. So if something like Druid of the Claw hits the board, you know, if he's using Fireball instead, he's losing a couple points of damage that way. How worried are you about mind control tech like right here? I mean, that's definitely what he's thinking about, I think.
Yeah, I think this if you just trade both those minions into the Keeper, it seems like just such a good trade for the Druid, right? I actually don't think you can play around mind control tech at this point.
Gosh.
And I do think that because Anaro, or because Tice silenced the Mad Scientist, he's kind of telegraphing that he has like a really bulky hand. He has a lot of high value drops that he can play. So I expect something like a Druid of the Claw in this turn. And Wrath for 1.
I just saw the card hovering there, and I was like, yeah, engaging TC 130.
I think that would have been like an instant call if he actually had that. Judging by the cards that Tice has played, we actually don't know what type of Druid it is.
Yeah.
Like, we could see something like Senjin come down or like Sludge Belcher. In fact, Sludge Belcher is in all types of Druid these days, just because Pilot Shredder is so common. 3/5 trades so well with a 4/3. That's pretty much in every deck.
It's funny that the best way to fight a 4-mana card right now is with a 5-mana card that doesn't even really trade up that much. It just gets like sometimes an extra hero power from your opponent, or like 1 extra point of damage from other sources. It's like it just does the best job of trading with Piloted Shredder. Doesn't even like really actually get the job done.
You know how threatening Piloted Shredder is? It's so threatening that I was talking to Sixo and he was like, oh, I just put 2 Piloted Shredders in every deck. And I'm like, even Freeze Maids? Yeah, I tried that. Yeah, it's pretty good.
You get extra Doomsayers that
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
exactly. You play 4 Doomsayers in a deck. That's amazing.
Busted.
So that wasn't the most efficient way of clearing everything, but I guess it's all right.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
I had mentioned that it looked like his Tyson's hand had a lot of minions, but I guess not. If he doesn't have a 5-drop on this turn, like a Druid of the Claw, he probably won't be playing anything really that great on his next turn either, because Druid typically doesn't have a lot of good 6-drops. Like you have Sylvanas, maybe Black Knight, maybe Piloted Sky Golems, but those are all fairly rare.
Yeah, Sylvanas would be okay here.
Oh,
yeah,
there we go.
It's basically going to act as a 5/5 taunt in a situation like this. So now there's 2 very different directions that Anaro can choose to take with this. The first one is ignore Sylvanas and kind of let her reign terror, or the second one is run in both of his minions and go from there. And with the Annoyatron, he's going to choose to take the, you know what, let you figure it out plan. He's going 7 to the dome, and Tice needs to find a way to answer this position.
Yeah, I think one of Anaro's biggest mistakes in his first game was that he wasn't aggressive enough. He didn't go to dome enough. And right now, he's definitely not repeating that mistake, just putting everything in the face, especially because he has a Fireball in his hand right now.
Oh my gosh. 12 points of life is not very much when you're facing down this kind of board. And you know, when you get the first signal that your opponent didn't have a mind control tech, when you had your first 4 minions
You just
in
go
play,
all in.
Yeah, you're pretty confident that they don't have mind control tech in the future turns as well.
So, yeah, again, judging by how bulky Tice's hand looked, I'm suspecting something like even like an Ancient of Lore here, but which doesn't really do well at all.
Yeah.
Something else might be he just has a lot of combo pieces in his hand. I mean, he did have a Wild Growth on turn 2, on curve.
Yeah.
So, yeah, his hand must be so awkward.
I'm trying to think of. It's tough to like really construct a hand. I mean, something like just having Force Natures and Savage Roars and nothing else really good. Is this gonna be full combo?
Oh, wow. Full combo to clear the board.
Okay. It's not. I was like, whoa! This hand got so bad so quick. Gotta be able to do a little bit of work here.
You know what? This actually isn't too bad. He gets like, he can test the board pretty well, and Anaro doesn't have that many cards in his hand. He has 3, and one of them is a spare part. Like after he clears this board somewhat, then I guess Anaro has to draw into like some kind of burn or like something like a Dr. Boom or Antonitis.
Here's really the big point of that is he's at 30, so he has so much time to do it.
You know, we were casting a lot of the Kingwin games over the past few weekends, and we noticed a lot of great games where it was Druid versus Mech Mage, and the Mech Mage, it did so much damage early on, but it kind of just drew dead over a long period of time. And it ended up with the Druid was at like 2 or 3 mana, or 2 or 3 health, and the Mech Mage needed to top deck Frostbolts or Fireballs. And in some cases where they didn't, the Druid actually came back with just a huge Savage War combo.
Yeah, that happens so many times too. Gosh, I still remember that game with Tyson Savitz. It was so good.
Yeah, it was like Tice was, again, in this position, Tice was the Mech Mage in that situation.
Yeah.
Savitz was the Druid. Tice had so many turns to draw to any type of burn, but Savitz just kept putting up taunts, kept hero powering to heal, and Tice just couldn't do it.
Wow, there's the Frostbolt, but he does not have a minion on board. So Zombie Chow, he's king of the hill right now. Piloted Shredder may have something to say about that. You know, he's going to be really sad to see this mad scientist. If you look at this, he's like, I just was holding on to this Zombie Chow to get past this position.
Yeah, especially when he gets taunted, right?
Yeah. So another Zombie Chow actually would not be, I think, a bad draw to Tice's deck.
Scenarios.
Scenarios certainly is not a bad drop right now at all. That's just, you know, it's kind of just like throwing bumps in the road.
Yeah, you even got it out before the Mirror Entity came out, so
Yeah.
it's kind of a double whammy.
Second Piloted Shredder is certainly a good draw, though. He's even got Frostbolt on this scenario, so if you wanted to like really kind of take that path. But I think when you're staring at 9 points of damage in your hand and your opponent's at 13, you really want to hang on to this stuff to activate your other outs. Because if he uses a Frostbolt, his second Frostbolt's not an out to actually win the game. And if he uses Fireball on something like a minion, the Fireball's on. Now he has basically no outs to win the game, straight up at that point. So I would venture to say this Frostbolt's going to be held on to. Wow, he's going to use it. I lied. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, I think it kind of makes sense with how Anaro has been playing some of his
Yeah.
previous games, where he kind of decided to use his board spells or his burn spells to in order to kind of form more board control. And I think it might work if Anaro eventually draws his big threats like Doctor Boom and Antonitis within the next few turns. But just in general, this kind of tells Tice, okay, I have a little more breathing room. He used a couple of more burn spells, so I can perhaps afford to play it a bit more slowly.
This looks like it's going to be a spell power swipe to me. Oh, geez. You know,
Doomsayer?
yeah, just about to say it could be such a dangerous minion to pop out of that shredder. And he's going to have a second chance for it as well. And just a cruel taskmaster and a Ruben Weblord. Oh, wow. But he doesn't have a frostbolt to use with it.
Oh man, that's biting him in the ass right now. Like if he had that frostbolt, the game would just be completely turned around at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, basically be over.
Yeah, like the scenario, freezing the scenarios, it wasn't really that relevant for the last turn, was it? If he didn't freeze the scenarios, he would have been able to clear off one of these two drops, but he would have one less fireball. And if he had two fireballs in his hand right now, he might just win on the next turn. So
just being able to. The other thing too is he could just Antonitis and frostbolt his opponent's face. Let the Antonitis die. I mean, it's soaking up a 4/4 and a 5/5 minion. You end that turn with two fireballs in your hand.
Yeah, Anaro, yeah, again, it just might be nerves. He's just so scared of dying every single turn to Force of Nature Savage Roar that he might be playing not to the best of his abilities. In addition, he's also seen his opponent has used one Force of Nature already in order to clear his own board. So a lot of players, they don't actually run two Force of Nature, so it's even less likely that Anaro would have been able, or that Tice would have been able to kill him on that following turn.
Yeah. Just nothing going on with these three minions. I mean, he's just got to play the Antonitis and hope his opponent doesn't have an efficient way to kill it, I think. I mean, I can see some merits to hanging on to it, but first you need to get a spare part. So I just don't think like you can afford to wait that long.
Yeah, I do think you have to just
there
go
are
to face
merits
right
to
now.
holding it, but just I don't see him being able to like make a legitimate use of it that long. And this is still 3 points of damage. I mean, Tice was sitting at 13 and he took 4 this turn. That's a quarter of his life total. I mean, this is still a big threat as far as Tice is concerned.
Yeah, Tice most likely will have to run a few of his minions into the Antonitis, which just gives Anaro one more turn to draw his second fireball. Did he use a fireball already?
Yeah, no, I don't think he's used a fireball yet.
All right, again, it's the same thing. He has to draw a burn in order to win the game. It's kind of the same theme we've been seeing with every Mech Mage versus Druid game.
It comes so close. It's always down to the end. A second swipe would be pretty darn good here.
Yeah.
Did he use a swipe earlier in this game?
Yeah, he used one swipe in the previous turn just to clear out the entire board.
Before that, I meant. Did he use one before that?
I don't believe so, no.
No, his hand was just slow. No, this has got to be a heal. There's no way he cannot not heal with an Ancient Lore. And oh my gosh, are both he's going to have to run the Antonitis? Oh my gosh, it's so painful to watch.
It's so painful, but again, I think Tice is in a pretty good position right now. If his opponent doesn't draw the fireball this turn.
Well, this draw.
Oh
my gosh. Anaro's going to return it back to Tice, rips the fireball, and that's going to do that game in. He's going to take a 2-1 lead now with Nerubian, Weblord, and Cruel Taskmaster.
Yeah.
Kidding, those are from Pilot Shredders. But wow, just what... It's funny that you mentioned like how consistently he's been playing because I'm kind of seeing you watch the game and you're like nodding when you see him make a play, and it's like you have such a good read into how the dynamic and his consistency and how he plays, and it really speaks a lot to his play style. And I think that his Paladin deck is really going to reflect on that as well. I imagine this is going to be really heavily focused on keeping the board to like a very, very small state and trying to get the incremental advantage until he has like here's my one giant play, and I've taken out everything you've done up until this point of the game, and that's how I'm going to beat you.
Yeah, I think Paladin players are the type of players who favor the board control style. And just judging from his tendency to clear the board all the time, I actually think it might be more likely that he's playing a more higher curving Paladin, such as Life Coach or Savita's Paladin, instead of the more common mid-range Paladin with the Knife Jugglers and Zombie Chows.
Right. So, going to be interested to see exactly how he approaches that matchup.
I think Tice might be a little salty for this match, though. Like he lost to a 1-3 Ragnaros hit, and then he lost to a Fireball top deck when he was in a pretty good position, I would say.
Yeah, I would never venture to say so, but you know that's kind of how Hearthstone rolls sometimes. You gotta roll with the punches. You gotta take your beats when they get handed to you because you know everyone does get lucky at some point.
So Anaro's last deck is Paladin.
Yeah.
So Tice has the Rogue and he has the Druid left.
Yeah.
I think Rogue is probably going to do fairly well unless the Rogue doesn't. I think the ways in that Rogue can lose that matchup are when they don't draw Azure Drake or Sprint, they don't draw anything, or they somehow don't draw their earlier removals against like Knife Juggler.
Yeah.
So it's kind of both sides of the table. Either they don't draw the half of the deck that removes, or they don't draw the half of the deck that that draws into cards. And actually, against higher raging paladins, there's situations where you don't draw cards like Violet Teacher in your opening hand, or you don't draw any minions, and you can't really pressure the paladin opponent. And that's really one of the ways that you win against paladin.
Yeah, I want to ask you a little bit about lineups here because in last Hero Standing, it often made a big difference on which deck you chose to queue up next, whether it have been momentum for information purposes, whatever that was going to be. But for this format, it's like I don't feel like, other than the first game, which I think matters a ton, it doesn't really matter what order you lead your decks in because you're going to have to win a game with every single one of them anyway. Is that the case in this matchup, or does he have a particular deck that he wants to play in this next match, and how much does it matter?
I've talked to a lot of players about this, and to be honest, some players are like, oh, in Conquest, you actually just put in a random generator what your deck is going to be. You flip a coin. And there's like not too many mind games. But yeah, as you mentioned, like with Druid and Rogue, you kind of want to scout out the Paladin deck. And I'm not really sure which of the decks that I think with both decks, the Druid and the Rogue, you kind of play similarly against whatever Paladin that you face. So I don't think it's too big of a deal, to be honest.
Game 4 for Thijs versus Anaro is going to get underway here. And still suffering a little bit of technical issues. So Thijs' hand is going to be unavailable for this game as well. But you know, seeing these cards in his hand, seeing a Defender of Argus just does not surprise me whatsoever.
Yeah, seeing the piloted Sky Golem as well, it kind of tells me that it's more of a control paladin instead of a mid-range paladin. So more of the life coach Savit's hot form style.
Yeah. 2 shielded mini-bots, not a bad start.
Yeah, not a bad start, but fortunately there's a zombie chow on
Zombie Chow
side of the board.
does a really good job at contesting shielded mini-bots, actually.
But there are a lot of cards in your hand, in your opening hand, that are pretty good against Druid. You have the 2 shielded mini-bots, I would say fairly good, exactly what you want in your opening hand. And you also have the Truce Over Champion, which is one of the absolute best cards against Druid. But one thing you're kind of missing is your Aldor, which is what you really need against some of the big innervate plays, though.
Yeah. Harrison Jones is also going to make sure that Druid's not using any weapons anytime soon.
Of course. If he plays like Blingtron, you know.
Yeah.
It's just a direct
always
counter.
That possibility. I played Blingtron really early on in my first I played Blingtron really early on in some of my first Druid decks, and I was like, "This is gonna be great. This is exactly what I need." And just every time I played it, it was just like they'd get Doomhammer, and I'd get like Stormwind Axe, or I'm sorry, what's the
Stormwind Axe or something.
It's not Stormwind Axe, Storm Rage Axe.
You know, it hasn't been used
Shaman
in so
Axe
long.
It's a 2/3. Nobody uses it except for in Arena. Whatever that card is, the 2-mana one with Overload.
I think we have to rewind back to last year. You know, it is the 1-year anniversary of Hearthstone. We have to rewind like exactly 1 year back when Zoo was so dominating and Shaman was using that card.
It was really good back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so just
well, it actually,
lonely hero power.
I remember it wasn't too good though, because is that when Shattered Sinclair, could that have been changed to a 3/2 a year ago?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, and it was because it used to be a 3/3, and those were not fun times. That card was way too good.
So even though a lot of people have been saying piloted Shredder is really good right now, we do have the True Silver to take care of that.
Yeah, it can still roll out something really good from this piloted Shredder though. Direwolf Alpha, nah, he's pretty average.
Yeah, pretty average, especially in Druid. You typically don't have like 2 minions on either side of the Direwolf.
I think he's happy to pick off the token here, and then make sure that he can continue to roll through his drops. So True to the Claw, this is definitely one of the better cards, I think, versus Paladin in general. It's just so how well it faces off versus True Silver Champion.
Yeah, exactly. We do see a pretty good draw from the Aldor. Typically, that's what you use against Druid to the Claw, but I'm not sure. Like if you play the Harrison, it just trades so badly into the Druid of the Claw.
I just don't really think he has another option other than the Aldor. He's got to get something on the board. Oh my God, the Direwolf Alpha is buffing it too, so it's still 2 power. This is like worst case scenario on all fronts.
Yeah, again, just judging by the hand that Anaro has right now, it does seem to be more and more looking like Coach's deck that he recently used to win both the Kingwin for Charity Spring Tournament and the Root Conquest Tournament. So Anaro just kind of scouting out the best decks, who's won the recent tournaments, what decks they used.
Always good to keep up on your information. It's one of the most important things in Hearthstone. Hearthstone's really just a big information battle.
Especially when you talk to players like Firebat, right? They really value their information, scouting what their opponent is going to bring, researching what kind of decks are best in the metagame, and then using that to win games and win BlizzCons even.
Just go ahead and win BlizzCon. Just a little information is all you need. So Swipe not looking like too shabby of a turn here. But this is the 7 mana point, so not surprised to see him play something big either.
If Tice doesn't have like a really good turn this turn, Anaro could just kind of snowball the game with Dr. Boom into Tyrion. That's like, oh wow.
Oh my gosh, a piloted Shredder is fetched off of a piloted Sky Golem. You know, what if this backfires? What if a Doomsayer comes off of this one, though?
Yeah, that would be just really sad. You know, a lot of players have been saying that that Pilot's Shredder is kind of too RNG-ish, and I've also heard a suggestion over the weekend that you should be able to actually look into what the Pilot Shredder drops when you play it, right?
Oh, did you hear that this weekend?
I did hear that. Who said that, actually?
I think it was like this admirable guy who was, spoke a lot with the professionals, and they kind of came up with this idea that it'd be really cool to, because Pilot Shredder really does have a very high impact on a player's ability to control the game. And sort of something that I think would be really neat and interesting to add into the flavor of this card, because typically when you look at something like, you're looking at like a car, for instance, you could look through the window and see who's driving the car. Well, something like Piloted Shredder, it'd be really neat to be able to look at Piloted Shredder and see what's actually going to come out of the minion. And not only does it kind of yield more control to the competitive side of things, but it also adds like a really interesting dynamic to how you choose to approach puzzles. Like, say like your opponent, a Doomsayer is going to pop out of a Piloted Shredder when you look at it. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to think like turns and turns in advance now. Is it worth it to try to kill this Doomsayer and give him all that extra life for it, or should I commit to going all in and trying to deal him enough damage that I could just forget about the Doomsayer and hope to kill him before that card advantage gets made up by him? It really changes such a high impact point of it, and gives players who are very mindful more control over it without kind of spoiling the flavor of that card at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if for example that Anaro had seen like a Doomsayer was coming out of the Pilot Shredder, this would have been a pretty interesting game. I would say. But as we said, because Tice didn't have a really great turn 7 last turn, he's kind of struggling to deal with the board right now. Anaro's going to curve perfectly from the Dr. Boom into the Tyrion, and wow, two to the Shade.
Yeah, 2 to the Shade I think is actually he's really happy to see, and I think he's also happy to see the other Boombot take out the Direwolf Alpha or hit his face. I think just as long as his Shade didn't die there, he was pretty happy with the Boombot rollouts. And then, of course, the big Game Hunter putting a lot of pressure on this board position.
Yeah, we have to note that Anaro is actually at 10 health right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is, it looks like he's got really easy ways to kind of answer everything that's going on, but when you're staring down your opponent going into 9 mana next turn and combo being a possibility, you can't be very comfortable. And again, consistent with the way that he's played so far, he's very fearful of those things coming to fruition, but I don't think that he has a way to play around it this turn. I think he's got to consecrate because he's staring down 7 points of damage, and since he only's got 4 mana left after that, it's just Knife Juggler and Hero Power.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Knife Juggler and Hero Power. Not a really great turn 8 right now.
Yeah. But I think it's just what he's got to do. So, just the times that Tice has Force Nature Savage Roar here, you got to give it to the Druid. He was really aggressive early on. He was able to put enough damage on you, and you didn't have the tools to answer it. So
yeah, you didn't draw into your cards like Sludge Belcher. You didn't draw into your Loatheb. So I guess you didn't really curve out that well. And especially with that Druid the Claw that came out in one of Druid's earlier turns, you didn't really have an answer to that. And now Druid, he's facing... He has just a pretty strong board, and he has so many cards, so it's very likely for him to have the combo at this point.
How scared of something like Black Knight Anaro is going to be right now. Because this is a card that we've seen become like almost extinct in a lot of the metagames. Like I can't remember the last time that I saw Black Knight come from anyone's hand other than my own. Because I just can't help but continue to play with that card. I just want to punish people who play taunts.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is pretty much no one plays that Wall Druid anymore except Strifecrow.
Yeah. And
you're not going to really want to snipe Strifecrow in this tournament because Strifecrow's not playing in it, right? So you don't get really great Black Knight value out of like big Ancients of War anymore.
That's when like Strifecrow like jump kicks through the ceiling and like lands into Anaro's spot. And he's like, I have returned. I'm playing in this tournament. And then his deck morphs in the middle of the game, and you're like, no, I didn't want to play against Strifecrow.
Yeah, I mean, Life Coach is here, and no one expected him, right? So again, he can't really play too much around the combo.
I think. Here's the question, though. Is Tyrion or is Sludge Belcher going to be better here? And if he equalities, certainly he's going to be playing the Sludge Belcher instead.
Hmm.
Or, I'm sorry, or the NT Healbot, one or the other. I think both of them are pretty fine options.
Yeah, I really like this play,
Yeah,
actually.
the hero power actually is going to dictate which one he's going to play now. So if he hits the juggle, I think, that's weird. I thought if he hit the juggle, he certainly would have played NT Killbot instead. But he wants to protect his knife juggler from the hero powers.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
that
I think this
also
is
makes sense.
fine because it also plays around combo. Like, he can't die to
It also
anything right
plays
now.
around Black Knight because Black
Oh,
Knight would
man.
be so reasonable to play here. And then he gets to stick Tyrion.
Yeah, Tyrion or like the double 5 drops. Both would be decent options next turn depending on what Tice plays. But again, Tice is winning the war of the number of cards he has, and certainly he has a Keeper of the Grove by now. He's drawn through pretty much half his deck.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to get past this. I mean, he's looking at 7 points of damage on the board. This is always the first spot you got to get through. It looks like yeah, that's a keeper. And oh wow, swipe is really big right now. So that's a full clear on this board position. He's gonna fall to 15. I'm sorry, to 16. And then I imagine this is gonna be Tyrion. I mean, you have to be comfortable at this point.
Lotheb.
Well, Lotheb could definitely change things. You could definitely see Lotheb and Antique Healbot here too. And I think that'd be a slightly more efficient use of the mana.
Mhm. And also, judging by Anaro's line of plays in his previous
Yep.
games, this is, of course, the safer option. It doesn't really die to anything. And in fact, it prevents a lot of spells that could clear the board. So
Yep.
it's a potential for Anaro to get back in this game.
This could be a sigh of relief also for Tice, though, if his hand's just a bunch of minions, to see like more reasonably dealt with threats hit the board than something like Tyrion.
Mhm.
So it all depends on what his hand's going to be.
I think at this point, it's actually very important for Anaro to keep track of what cards are being used in Tice's hand, what the positioning that they come from. Because we knew Tice didn't have combo the previous turns, so he kind of eliminate the possibility of combo in those specific cards. But if Tice keeps playing cards that he just drew, that means he still doesn't have combo.
Yeah. What do you think about taking out the Antique Healbot this turn, so that way your opponent can't run over your Sludge Belcher token?
Mhm.
Is it worth the 3 damage sacrifice, or do you think that he needs to be kind of pushing for damage and making sure that when he draws in a combo that it's always going to be lethal range?
Yeah, I think that the token isn't too relevant right now, and I do think putting your opponent to 14. You've seen how conservatively he typically plays. So if you put him down to 14, you're going to put the fear of the combo again into his mind. So he's going to have to play around that a bit more.
Yeah, well, fear may be. Anaro looks like he's going to put his faith in the light and hope Tyrion can carry him to a 3-1 victory here. And Tice needs something to deal with this.
And wow, he plays around mind control tech, doesn't summon a minion.
That in this position, it's actually really smart to do that because mind control tech is, it's one of the few ways I think your opponent can actually break the game open again. Is when you're looking at this kind of spot, because even if he's got something like Keeper of the Grove, he's just looking at 14 points of damage on the other side of the board.
I think another factor, a much smaller factor, is that this type of deck typically doesn't run 2 quartermasters, so it's less likely for the minion to the 1/1 token to get buffed on the next turn.
Yep.
We do see the second Keeper of the Grove, of course. Druids always have that. They always have a keeper to deal with Tyrion,
You
right?
sound a little bitter.
A little salty, right?
Yeah. You're not even playing the game.
Playing too much Paladin these
Yet
days.
they just always have the Keeper of the Grove.
But, you know, typically this the Keeper of the Grove isn't a great counter.
Whoa.
Whoa, stealing all those Avenges, right?
Yeah, that's sort of a really big heads up. And Keys and Mystic. Wow, Golden Keys and Mystic looks great. I'm going to craft one of those when I get home.
So, unfortunately, Anaro, he can't play around combo at all, so I guess he just plays his biggest minions and
Yep.
crosses his fingers and hopes.
Yeah, there's not really much you can do too much at this point. So he's going to continue to like choke board position, though. So, I mean, playing around combo, he's not playing around at this turn, but if he draws something like Guardian of Kings, he wants to keep himself as far out of reach as possible.
And these kind of decks, he probably doesn't run Guardian of Kings, but I have seen these types of decks run 2 land hands. So if he survives the next turn, it's very possible that he draws into one of his big heals. So how fast is it going to be? An instant call.
Oh, jeez, yeah. That's just going to do it. Tice is going to tie this series up now at 2 games apiece, and we're looking at Game 5 with Rogue versus Paladin now.
Yeah, at one point it seemed like Tice was in a pretty huge disadvantage after losing 2 games to some pretty good top deck slash RNG. But now Tice, I would say, is in a pretty dominating position. A lot of players, depending on who you ask, say Rogue versus Paladin, Rogue from Tice and Paladin from Anaro. That's something like anywhere from a 60% matchup to a 90% matchup.
Key turns this game. I don't really feel like there's too much more that could have been done differently. I felt like every player was kind of approaching their game plans wisely and moving forward from there. The really only big thing in that game was that Anaro did have a lot of decisions in his end game and how he chose to sequence his minions. Is there anything he could have done in sort of the turn where he had anti-Healbot, Lotheb, Tyrion, etc.? Is there any sequence of minions he could have made there that would have given him a better chance to win than what he actually had?
I think he did play the strongest minions slash the strongest creatures on the board at every given turn. Lotheb plus Healbot was very good, as opposed to Tyrion plus Hero Power. That would have just gotten silenced, and he would have been in a worse position, and he probably would have lost faster to the combo. With the decision to Lotheb and anti-Keelbot on the turn that he did, it gave him more time to draw into Lay on Hands.
Yeah, Game 5 is about to get underway right now. Tice versus Anaro. The winner is going to start out their group 1-0, and the loser 0-1. Not the kind of position I think you want to be in. You really want to be on the 1-0 side of things in your group.
Yeah. You know, one big question in this matchup is, do you actually keep Muster for Battle in your opening hand against Paladin? You have to expect that Rogue almost all the time they have Fan of Knives, right?
Yeah, it's Muster for Battle is like, I still think it's fine to keep because you punish them so hard when they don't have Fan of Knives. And the other thing, too, is that later in the game, Fan of Knives can still be, I think, a decent option. You get a 1-4 weapon out of it. You do take up your opponent's turn. So, I mean, obviously, I think it's better for the Rogue than it is for the Paladin in that kind of position. But I still think it merits keeping, especially like you mentioned. He's probably only going to have one copy of Quartermaster in here if he's got Quartermaster. And so because of that, it doesn't really hold the same weight that it would normally.
That's really interesting. There's a Knife Juggler in this deck, and that's not a card that typically is in the kind of Life Coach Paladin. So it's sort of like a. It seems this deck is sort of like in between the Life Coach really control Paladin and the typical mid-range Paladin.
Yeah. Knife Juggler might just be one of those cards where he felt like he needed something early because he does have so much dedicated to late. I mean, he's got Harrison, he's got Sludge Belcher, 2 anti-Keelbots, I think, and kind of moving forward there. He just might have just needed something else to go in the early game, and Knife Juggler might have just fit the bill.
Yeah, I do feel that currently with Anaro's hand, it's actually fairly above average against Rogue. I think two of the most important cards in this matchup are that True Silver and the Harrison Jones. True Silver Champion just deals with everything except for Valley Teacher that the Rogue can play.
Yeah.
Valley Teacher maybe like Lotheb, but those are much later in the game. And Harrison Jones, of course, draws you more cards, denies the big weapons like the oiled weapons that Rogue typically has.
Yeah. No Fan of Knives was seen this turn, and so I'm curious if he's going to be comfortable just kind of going for the gusto here. And I think that Knife Juggler and Hero Power is probably still a better option. You do have a couple more points of damage you can get out of the 1-4 weapon for Muster for Battle, and you get an extra value out of the Knife Juggler here. So I think I'd like to see him play those two, and kind of let your opponent have their day when they have their SI7 agent.
Yeah, and next turn you can, if your opponent plays something like Backstab or rather the SI agent, you can set up for the True Silver Champion.
Yep.
So you're just getting all your good cards out basically. Possibly a Violet Teacher in this turn, and that's usually one of the best cards against Paladin, or just one of the best cards against any deck that requires board control.
There's the Azure Drake. We're gonna see a prep Fan of Knives. And I'm guessing not.
He was really hoping to draw the Fan of Knives, I think.
Tice tends to make them very quickly. And then when he has just a bunch of different good plays available, he's really going to take his time, which is what I like to see. Like when you have like just he's so experienced in his matchups, he practices so much. Like when he knows the play is the right play, he's going to just kind of go for it.
Oh wow, Backstab. I actually didn't expect. I think I actually thought he was considering Blade Flurrying on this turn. But he did have the Backstab, and this is definitely much better.
Yeah, Backstab keeps the Knife Juggler off the board. So.
He seemed to mull over that decision like for a pretty long time.
Yeah,
so
I'm curious exactly why. I mean, it may indicate a wider range, but it also could just be like reluctance to use a Backstab without being able to combo something with it.
You know, I had mentioned that Harrison Jones and True Silver are two of the best cards you can have against Rogue, and I think with the Lotheb that he's just drawn, he's pretty much drawn like one of the absolute best hands you can draw with this deck against Rogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, True Silver again doing some work, killing the Azure Drakes, like pretty much the best answer in the game to Azure Drake.
The original Death Spite.
Yeah. OG Death Spite.
That card's so good. I was so sad before like all these before GBG came out and Paladin was just it wasn't a competitive class. Even though I played it, it was like I played it simply because it was targeted at very few classes that everyone was really playing at the time.
Yeah, and it's a fun class, right?
Yeah, it really is. And then but True Silver Champion was just I felt like when you drew that card, you were in such good shape, and when you didn't draw it, you just died.
Yeah, with
Like, I mean, I kind of have any way to deal
with
with
a lot of weapons like that, or weapon classes, it's like, oh, I drew Fiery War Axe, so I'm it's such a better position than I had been if I didn't draw a Fiery War Axe.
Goblin Auto Barber gonna make another appearance here.
Yeah, what Goblin Auto Barber
Yeah.
tells me is that he probably has a better play on turn 5, but he doesn't really want to run that play into True Silver. So I might suspect something like an Azure Drake coming on the next turn.
Yeah, really. He got sort of trapped here too by the Harrison Jones because he wanted the fresh dagger from the Auto Barber. So doing a good job at soaking up the True Silver Champion charge, but not doing a good job in terms of this tempo development. Really a big loss here. He's fighting from behind. Quite a while. Something like Backstab SI7 Agent could really easily get him back into this, though.
Yeah, I feel like this is one of the games where Tice, even though we can't see his hand right now, he seemed to draw below average, seeing that he didn't have the Fan of Knives on turn 3. But the Paladin seemed to draw above average with the Harrison Jones, Lotheb, and True Silver. So it's kind of geared towards more of an even matchup.
Perhaps Sprint, I'm sure, is going to offer him plenty of options. 10 cards in hand for Tice right now.
You know, this game kind of reminds me of a game between Savitz and Life Coach that we casted in the Kingwin for Charity tournament, where Savitz, he played the Rogue against Life Coach's Paladin, and he couldn't really get board control early on. Life Coach just seemed to kind of pile on the board every single turn, and he spent all his resources into clearing the board every turn on the first few games, or in the first few turns, so he kind of ran out of that burn, and eventually he drew out his entire deck, and he just couldn't kill Life Coach.
Yeah, Tice having to make use of a backstab here just so he does not simply burn a card next turn.
Simply.
I'm glad you caught it.
Yeah, right now, I think Lotheb is a pretty good play, because you saw the backstab coming, and I guess the SI agent is always a concern, right?
Yeah.
But if you play Lotheb, it's you kind of force your opponent to play an SI. And if you had some other options, such as playing like a Fan of Knives plus attacking with the hero power, like this kind of locks him out.
I mean, this is kind of looking like it might be a shutout style position. Tice is going to fall down to 12 life here. He's facing 12, and he's under Lotheb this turn, so no spells are happening. And just, like, what on earth do you... he's got to have just, like, straight-up strong minions. So there's the SI7 agent. Again, he had 10 cards in his hand last turn, so no surprise to see him have some strong responses here. But at this point, like, I'm curious how much damage that Anaro can just push for.
Yeah.
He's even drawn Tyrion now. So if he just goes 7 damage to face... Oh, wait,
What?
does he have lethal just with that? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11?
No, he doesn't. He needed.
No, yeah, he's got muster for battle. So he's got the
Oh,
extra
wow.
damage from that. So Anaro's actually going to take the series. The one extra damage that he's getting from this muster battle weapon, making all the difference in the
Lights
world.
justice.
All you guys out there who think that 1-4 weapon doesn't matter, take note of this game. Anaro's going to take this series 3 games to 2 over Tice with his lineup. And wow, just what a great match. Something else I just love about Conquest is that even going into Game 5, it's still so fresh, and we're seeing everyone play so many different classes. There are 5 different classes represented so far in both the matches that we've seen.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's the only repeat deck I believe was the Mage, and of course
Yeah.
Mech Mage, everyone's playing that. It's such a strong class, but there's just so many different options for every single player. I mean, you do have players that bring 3 fatigue decks, right, to tournaments.
Well, you have players like Chalky who bring 3 fatigue decks to tournaments. Hopefully that doesn't become too much of a terrible strategy or a terribly often occurring strategy, because my gosh, those are long matches. You thought watching Life Coach took a long time. Wow. I mean, Life Coach did 4-0 him in the finals. Though,
Yeah,
so
of course.
Maybe
And a very quick finals,
Yeah,
actually, right?
Yeah, it actually surprising it was a very quick finals.
Yeah.
So last points of that game. You kind of mentioned it, throughout the course of it. He just kept drawing the right card every step of the way. Anaro that was. He had the Harrison Jones. He had True Silver Champion. He picked up Lotheb. What could Tice have possibly done to really get out of that position, or was he just kind of kept in check at every step of the way?
Yeah, I kind of felt like Tice was playing maybe a bit safe every single turn. He didn't really want to play in the into True Silver Champion by maybe playing the Goblin Auto Barber plus daggering on turn 5, when maybe he could have played something like an Azure Drake, which played into the True Silver. But of course, we can't see his hand. He might have just had like really bad cards. Maybe he drew his Fan of Knives too late. Maybe he had cards like he had the both Tinker's Oil in his hand. He had all the burst that he needed, but he just didn't have the minions on board. He never really got board control that entire game, and that's a large part again because of the True Silver Champion. You don't think of that card as one of the more important cards. Like you think of Harrison Jones and Lotheb. Obviously, they're very good against Rogue, but True Silver is definitely up there. I would even consider True Silver maybe even more important than Lotheb or Harrison in that matchup.
Yeah, just being able to keep everything in check and make sure the board doesn't snowball. That control certainly a big factor in that. So Anaro's going to move on to 1-0 in his group so far. And Tice, not out of it yet, but he's going to fall to 0-1. And we are at the G Arena in London for the Hearthstone Spring Masters. And we got a third match of the day coming up after this one, which is going to be the Group B winners match. So we'll have that for you coming up. We're going to get word of what it is, so you guys are going to have to stay tuned to watch it. We're going to go to a quick break, but guys, don't go anywhere. There's so much more Hearthstone to be played and so much more big top decks to be had as well. For Monk and for Gfinity, that's Admirable. We'll be back right after this.